Johnny Mac with your Daily Comedy News. Man, there are like three things that could be the lead story today. There's the Dave Chappelle backlash, Jay Leno burned in a fire, and the Grammy nominations came out. But let's start with late night. It was a pretty good set of jokes. Tiffany Trump was married over the weekend. Former President Donald Trump walked her down the aisle. Jimmy Kimmel said it was an emotional weekend for Trump. He gave away a daughter and the Senate on the same night. Jimmy Fallon said everybody was talking about the reception when Tiffany threw the bouquet and Melania elbowed 6 other women to catch it. Kimmel, before the father-daughter dance, Trump went up to every woman at the wedding and said, "Are you Tiffany?" And then he gave a beautiful toast. I have to admit, when he got to the part where he talked about Hillary's emails, I teared up. That's great. Seth Meyers was curious about last night's announcement. You living in my future know what Trump announced last night. I do not. But the joke, Trump has announced that he plans to make a very big announcement. That's right. He's very excited to announce that the 2024 election has already been stolen from him. Switching topics, I spent, no joke, not 1, not 2, but 3 full hours in the Ticketmaster queue. If you tried to get Taylor Swift tickets, you know what I'm talking about. But I saw this tweet while I was looking up Taylor Swift line. Luke Schnoebelen tweeted, "If Taylor Swift doesn't have a song called Q is Paused on her next album, it's a huge missed opportunity." All right, Dave Chappelle backlash. Page 6 says Dave did a fake Saturday Night Live monologue during the dress rehearsal, then switched his material for the live show. Whoa, that's major. A source told Page 6. Now, I'm going to read the quote as is. The tense here is a little weird, but the quote as written is, Dave does a fake monologue during the dress rehearsal because he doesn't want Lorne Michaels or anyone else to know what his real monologue is. The source adds that during the dress rehearsal, Chappelle made a joke about a writer who refused to work with him on the show. The insider tells Page 6 that joke, quote, caused tensions to flare. So whatever happened, Dave switched up the monologue for the actual live show. Now, did Lorne know what Dave was going to do in the live show? Did they have a conversation in between? There's definitely more to unpack here. I'm looking forward to the truth coming out. The monologue caused even more controversy. Dave Chappelle was blasted by the Anti-Defamation League for popularizing anti-Semitism with his jokes. ADL CEO Jonathan Greenblatt said, "We shouldn't expect Dave Chappelle to serve as society's moral compass, but disturbing to see Saturday Night Live not just normalize but popularize anti-Semitism. Why are Jewish sensitivities denied or diminished at almost every turn? Why does our trauma trigger applause?" The American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten tweeted, "Exactly right, Jonathan. It was chilling to watch. No trauma should be laughed at or made fun of. None." Time Out New York Theater editor Adam Feldman said the Dave Chappelle SNL monologue probably did more to normalize anti-Semitism than anything Kanye did. An opinion piece on CNN credit to Mark Goldfader. Mark writes, "First, when it came to West, Chappelle actually reinforced the anti-Semitic ideas West had blasted. Chappelle explained why it's okay to think anti-Semitic thoughts like Jews control Hollywood, but you just can't say them out loud in this climate. When it got to Kyrie Irving, Chappelle expressed real surprise that the NBA All-Star had gotten in trouble for endorsing, quote, some movie that had, quotes, apparently, I don't know, some anti-Semitic tropes or something. Chappelle noted that Irving was slow to apologize, but that the NBA's list of demands to get back in their good graces got longer and longer, and this is where I draw the line," Mark writes, and that's where Chappelle went off the rails. He concluded his bid on Irving by telling a national audience, "I know that Jewish people have been through terrible things all over the world, but you can't blame that on black Americans. You just can't." Mark says, "It is true that Chappelle seems to lack nuance when it comes to Jews and race. Just like there are black members of the LGBTQ community, there are also many Jews of color, and Jewish people of all complexions have been consistently othered in insidious ways. For example, in America, Jews were considered non-white at times when whites were being privileged, and today they're often told by people like Chappelle that they're just privileged whites when they demand recognition of their struggles. The proper response is always to call out oppression in all contexts, not to repeatedly try and reframe every conversation as a secret referendum on race. Chappelle's a brilliant man with an important voice. He can and should do better." An editorial in the National Review takes a different viewpoint, saying Chappelle's comments were undoubtedly distasteful and crude, but that's what comedy's supposed to be. The difference between Kanye's malicious invective and Chappelle's stand-up routine is that was a stand-up routine. If you can't lampoon stereotypes, comedy is dead. I say this often on the podcast, and increasingly often. I find this just fascinating every day doing this show. When I started, I really thought it would be like, hey, Bert Kreischer is going on tour. He's going to have a cruise, which is an actual story we will get to. But more and more, it's these very, very serious topics. Maybe I was just naive and I should have realized, as somebody who's paid a lot of attention to George Carlin's career, that comedy and politics and issues and topics have always been intertwined. And it's not just, hey, Louis C.K. sold out in Australia. We'll get to that as well. All right, the other story that could have been the lead today, a major story, Jay Leno was working on a car in his garage when one of the cars burst into flames. According to TMZ, flames from a gasoline fire burned the left side of Jay Leno's face. Luckily, avoiding his eye or ear, he was rushed to the Grossman Burn Center. Leno spoke to TMZ from the hospital bed. He said he was working on his 1907 steam car, repairing a clogged fuel line. The fuel leaked and gas sprayed all over his face and hands. A spark triggered an explosion and set the left side of his face on fire. Jay's friends were right there and quickly jumped to his aid, and they extinguished the flames and called for help. The left side of Jay Leno's face and hands got third-degree burns that could require skin grafts. Leno put out a statement to Variety that says, "I got some serious burns from a gasoline fire. I'm okay. Just need a week or two to get back on my feet." All of Jay Leno's engagements for this week and weekend have obviously been postponed. I was listening to Keith Olbermann's podcast earlier today, and he had worked with Jay a few times, and he said, sure, Jay has tons of ambition, and even, alluded to the Conan O'Brien thing, but said nobody had a bigger heart. Hopefully Jay Leno will be okay here. And also, as somebody who observes this all the time, and Jay is not the most popular comic and somebody that other comics like to take shots at, I'm wondering if there will be jokes related to this incident. I kind of suspect there will be. The other thing that could have been the lead today, the Grammy nominations came out. Best Comedy Album nominees. Now, if you're a longtime listener, you know I have a pet peeve that I find a lot of these things to be not really albums, as somebody from the 20th century would consider an album to be. To me, an album is something you record, designed to be audio, and you put on some sort of portable device. In later years, these would be MP3s. But there was something different between an album and a TV show. For example, Saturday Night Live is clearly a TV show, whereas Bruce Springsteen Born to Run is clearly an album. Those were two different things. Now we find ourselves in the 21st century, and people don't really put out albums anymore. And I'm going to read to you from the Grammys official rules. So I have to get off my high horse, but I do wish we could give Grammys to proper albums. And if we're not going to have proper albums, maybe we shouldn't have the category and we should just have some sort of Emmy for Best TV Comedy Special. All right, off the high horse. Here's the official criteria, which tells you why all these things are quote-unquote legal, for lack of a better term. The Grammys screening criteria for the category Best Comedy Album. This category recognizes excellence in comedy recordings, including spoken word stand-up comedy and musical novelty recordings, new comedy performance albums, whether recorded in a studio or live, and whether recorded in an audio-only format or Shut Up Johnny Mac as part of a video project, Shut Up Johnny Mac, are eligible. Recordings that are compilations, excerpts from a current year radio or television program, or new recordings of comedy performance first aired on television within 5 years of the release date are also eligible. So shut up, Johnny Mac, get off your high horse. All right, Grammys, I surrender the point. We're going to pretend Netflix specials are albums. Shut up, Johnny Mac, get off your high horse. You read the rules. Okay, recordings that are compilations, excerpts from non-current year broadcast radio or TV programs, audiobooks, even if considered humorous, albums of sound effects, and albums of environmental recordings are not eligible in Best Comedy Album and may be entered in other categories as appropriate. All right, enough of that. What are the nominees? The nominees are Dave Chappelle for The Closer, Jim Gaffigan for Comedy Monster, Randy Rainbow for A Little Brains, A Little Talent, Louis C.K. for Sorry, Patton Oswalt for We All Scream. All right, let me handicap these. Now, part of me wants to say they will stay away from Dave Chappelle because he's controversial. However, last year's winner was Louis C.K., who's controversial. Louis won last year, and Louis is nominated again this year, so we can't rule out Louis. We can't rule out Dave Chappelle. Patton Oswalt's We All Scream was his least best special of like his last 5, so I don't think that'll win. And Randy Rainbow, A Little Brains, A Little Talent. Is that mainstream enough? Are the people who vote on these things going to be like, oh, I know who Randy Rainbow is? See, I would say no. The safe bet here would be Jim Gaffigan's Comedy Monster, which was, I think, Jim's best special. I'd like to see that win. I could see Chappelle winning this. From the New York Post, disgraced comedian Andy Dick sentenced to 90 days behind bars after being convicted of sexual battery. He's also been ordered to register as a sex offender. This goes back to an incident in April 2018 when an Uber driver told the LA County Sheriff's Department that Andy Dick had groped the driver. Andy will check himself into the LA County Jail starting tomorrow, November 17th. He was also ordered to complete 52 Alcoholics Anonymous sessions, 52 Sexual Compulsion Anonymous sessions, 12 mental health counseling sessions, and pay restitution to the victim. Once released from prison, Andy Dick will spend 12 months on summary probation where he will be closely monitored. Unrelated to that charge, Andy had been arrested in October for theft-related charges in Santa Barbara, California. Told her recently that Louis C.K. had canceled his New Zealand shows. You know, scheduling conflicts and stuff had nothing to do with the Comedy Guild or whatever it was saying, you're not welcome here. He had scheduling conflicts. But apparently the scheduling conflicts didn't affect his Australia dates because those shows are happening. In fact, the Daily Mail says that the secondary market for the shows in Melbourne were going for 700 Australian dollars. Let me Google here and see how much the Australian dollar is going for right now. Depending on where you exchange your currency, 700 Australian dollars is $472.50-ish. Your exchange rates may vary. All right, so like $500 to see Louis C.K., so he's not canceled in Australia, apparently. Tickets for at least one of his Sydney shows are sold out. There are still tickets available for his performance in Brisbane tomorrow night. If you want to hop on a Qantas and you downloaded this podcast when I released it at 3:05 a.m., you got a shot at making that show. Hey, Bert Kreischer went on social media and he announced the fully loaded boat cruise. This sounds fun. How do I get on this? Bert, don't you want me to cover your cruise? I could do podcasts from the boat. Other comedians will be there, including Whitney Cummings, Mark Normand, and Miss Pat. It is expected more comedians will be announced. The cruise next October, the 27th to the 31st. It leaves from Miami and take you around the Bahamas for 4 days. There will be partying, live stand-up shows, and live podcast tapings, fully loaded at sea.com if you want the details. Sounds fun. Tickets go on sale today. Get moving. I'm the writer on a podcast. It's called Palace Intrigue. We talk about the royal family every day for 5-6 minutes. It's a lot of fun to work on. And here's one of those stories that I put together for Palace Intrigue that I don't even have to rewrite for this show. John Oliver commented on the royal family on Last Week Tonight. Oliver said, in the UK, the argument was in the wake of the Queen's death, it just wasn't the time for criticism of her or the monarchy in general. It would be impolite. But it's been over 2 months, and Charles is king now. And while for many, the charm of the Queen was in her longevity and her tendency towards silence, you never really knew what she thought about anything, neither of those things are true about her son. He doesn't have the inscrutability of his mother or enjoy her level of public affection, and his ascent to the throne comes as the UK is facing a cost of living crisis. The job of the monarch is to be head of state, a symbolic position tasked with receiving incoming and outgoing ambassadors, heads of state, and to make state visits abroad. Oliver explained, think of the royals as Mickey and Minnie at Disneyland. They're not running the rides, but they're a mascot of the whole operation, and people kind of like having their pictures taken with them. That is brilliant. But John says that comes at a price. The royal family's wealth, unlike their gene pool, is massive. The two duchies are exempt from corporate taxes, and Charles pays no inheritance tax, and when you factor all that in, it sure starts to feel like they're costing a hell of a lot more than just £1 per person. They're like a human appendix. We've long evolved past needing them, and there's a compelling case for their surgical removal. I do get that people shouldn't be held personally responsible for whatever their ancestors did, but trying to talk about the British role in the slave trade without talking about the monarchy is sort of like trying to talk about Jeffrey Epstein without talking about the monarchy. They're inextricably linked, however uncomfortable they might find that fact. Oliver also reminded viewers of one of the most brutal atrocities carried out by the British, the crushing of the Mau Mau Rebellion. The Kenya Human Rights Commission estimates that the British executed, tortured, or maimed 90,000 people during the crackdown and detained 160,000 in barbed wire camps. Way to make the podcast funny, Johnny Mac. Oliver said, we don't know what the Queen knew. What she's briefed on is kept secret very conveniently. But we do know what was done in her name by her government. If you're the symbol of a country, you represent what it does. You can't just say you're a symbol and bear no responsibility for how the institutions that you're the head of behave, John added. You don't have to hate the royal family personally. I mean, Google Prince Philip racism or Prince Andrew everything and see where you land. But you don't have to hate them. You don't even have to think that the institution shouldn't exist. But if it's going to continue to, it is fair to expect significantly more from them, because too often they hide behind the convenient shield of politeness and manners, which frequently demands the silence of anyone who might criticize them or what they stand for. Oliver wondered if the segment would air on British TV, specifically Last Week Tonight airs on Sky TV, and said, if they do cut it out for being disrespectful, they should seriously think about why they and everyone else are working so hard not to offend a family whose name was branded into people's skin during the slave trade and who sit atop a pile of stolen wealth wearing crowns adorned with other countries' treasures. That's your comedy news for today. If you want more royal stuff, Palace Intrigue, wherever you get your shows. If you want more comedy stuff, I'll be back tomorrow. You can follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, audio-only version on YouTube, doing quite well. Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow.